Tonight, police declare the firebombing of an immigration processing centre in Kent an act of terrorism. Andrew Leake threw up to 3 petrol bombs at the site in Dover last Sunday. Police say he was driven by extreme right-wing ideology. Also on the programme, claims tonight that Rishi Sunak knew of a complaint against Sir Gavin Williamson before appointing him to his government. Vigils across South Korea to remember the 156 victims of a crush on Halloween amid growing anger at the authorities. And England's women reached the Rugby World Cup final in New Zealand after defeating Canada. Good evening. The firebombing of an immigration processing centre in Kent was motivated by extreme right-wing ideology, and it met the threshold for a terror incident, police have said. 66-year-old Andrew Leake carried out the attack at the site in Dover last Sunday. 2 members of staff at the centre were left with minor injuries. He is believed to have later taken his own life. John Donnison has the latest.
An act of terror. This is the moment Andrew Leake threw one of up to 3 makeshift firebombs in a drive-by attack on a migrant processing centre in Dover last Sunday. Today, police said Leake was motivated by terrorist ideology. In a statement, Tim Jack, the Senior National Coordinator for Counter-Terrorism Policing, said after considering the evidence collected so far, whilst there are strong indications that mental health was likely a factor, I'm satisfied that the suspect's actions were primarily driven by an extremist ideology. This meets the threshold for a terrorist incident. The suspect, Andrew Leake, is thought to have taken his own life shortly after the attack, which police say was likely motivated by extreme right beliefs. It led to around 700 migrants being transferred from the Dover processing centre to this one at Manston, which was already overcrowded. The Home Secretary flew into Manston on Thursday, but Suella Braverman is facing a possible legal challenge over detention conditions there. The day after last weekend's firebomb attack in Dover, she told MPs Britain was facing an invasion of illegal migrants, and yesterday a Home Office minister said detainees had a cheek to complain about conditions at Manston.
We have to be really, really careful about the words that we use and the rhetoric when we talk about anything to do with migration. Especially people in power should know the weight that their words hold. Comments like that, I think, just show the complete disregard for basic human dignity.
But the government says the real problem is the number of migrants continuing to cross the channel, and that fixing an asylum system, which it describes as broken, is a first-order priority. John Donnison, BBC News.
It's been claimed tonight that the Prime Minister knew of a complaint against Sir Gavin Williamson by a senior colleague before he appointed him as Cabinet Office Minister last month. Well, our political correspondent Ian Watson is here. What's this all about, Ian?
Well, if you remember, Rita, when Rishi Sunak became Conservative Party leader, he said he was going to govern with integrity and with humility. He was immediately criticised for bringing Suella Braverman back, who'd broken the ministerial code. And now his judgment has been questioned once again because the Sunday Times has obtained texts from his close ally, Sir Gavin Williamson, to the then Chief Whip, Wendy Morton, in which he uses very choice language. He calls her stupid and even accuses her of rigging the ticket allocation to the Queen's funeral. Now, her friends clearly see this as intimidatory, even bullying behaviour, and she herself has confirmed that she's complained to Conservative Party headquarters. But potentially politically more damaging is the claim by the former Conservative Party chairman, Sir Jake Berry, that he told Rishi Sunak about that complaint, and then 24 hours later, the new Prime Minister brings Sir Gavin back into government as a minister. Now, tonight, Downing Street say they won't comment on this while the complaints process is ongoing, but the Lib Dems are calling for Sir Gavin to be sacked.
Ian, thank you very much. Ian Watson. Rail passengers have faced severe disruption today, despite strike action being called off. Tens of thousands of rail workers had been due to walk out in the long-running dispute over pay and working conditions. Strikes planned for Monday and Wednesday have also been cancelled as negotiations between the RMT union and train operators are stepped up. Here's our business correspondent, Mark Ashdown.
No strike, no picket line, but no trains either. Today's walkout was called off with such little notice, rail operators say it was too late to run trains they'd already cancelled. It's left passengers feeling frustrated and confused.
We were hoping that the strike wasn't going to affect the trains. We heard it was called off, and now we're hoping for the best.
We wanted to go to Barnsley, but not doing no trains at all.
Fans attending the Wales Rugby Union match against New Zealand faced travel disruption.
I expected it to be a slow journey home. Yeah, I don't think it'll be pretty.
We need the train stopped at 5 o'clock, so we made the decision to drive in and book a hotel.
A reduced strike timetable means just 20% of services have run across England, Scotland and Wales. Those which did started much later this morning and finished earlier this evening. Thousands of members of the RMT union at 14 rail companies and Network Rail have been involved in this long-running dispute about pay, jobs and terms and conditions. The RMT says its previous strikes have helped the rail companies to see sense, and it says it's now looking forward to intensive negotiations where it says it's finally expecting to be made a pay offer to put to its membership. But make no mistake, this is a big shift for the union. It's the first time it's called off a strike to negotiate in 6 months of industrial action.
There's a whole range of issues. It's cost them a lot of money in striking up to now. They will never get it back, even with a big pay rise. Christmas is coming, energy costs, family pressures, all those things will come into play. Maybe there's just a bit of a desire to find a way out of this and an off-ramp.
Network Rail has made a pay offer of 8% over 2 years. It welcomed new talks, as did the rail operators, saying progress is being made. The new Rail Minister, Hugh Merriman, said he wants to work positively and constructively with all the unions, and he's ruling nothing out in the search for a solution. The mood music might be changing, but for passengers, the cancellation of further strikes on Monday and Wednesday is too late to avoid further disruption. Mark Ashdown, BBC News.
Sinn Féin's Michelle O'Neill, speaking at her party's annual conference, has accused the Democratic Unionist Party of blocking the formation of a government to prevent a nationalist from becoming First Minister. In May's election, Sinn Féin became the largest party at Stormont for the first time, meaning Ms O'Neill was entitled to become Northern Ireland's First Minister. The DUP is refusing to enter into power sharing until its complaints about post-Brexit trade rules are addressed, but Ms O'Neill called it a cover.
It is so wrong that progress on issues affecting the daily lives of people are being put on hold because one party refuses to accept the democratic outcome of last May's Assembly election. Now, at any time, that would be unacceptable, but in the middle of a cost of living crisis, it is really disgraceful.
Large vigils have taken place across South Korea to commemorate the victims of a crash that killed more than 150 people. The disaster in the capital Seoul a week ago has caused growing public anger. Mourners, many holding placards and white candles, gathered in the city to demand justice. Some called for the president, Yoon Suk-yeol, to resign. Here's our correspondent, Nick Marsh.
This city is still in shock. After one of the most terrible weeks in recent memory, adults came together to mourn the young. But the air is also thick with blame. Our children have been sacrificed, this woman says. I need to mourn. The Korean government has not done a good job. We want them to truly say sorry, and we want the president to resign. Last Saturday, 156 people, nearly all of them young, left home and didn't come back. It was supposed to be a fun Halloween night out, the first without COVID restrictions, but the authorities had made no plans for crowd control. This lone officer came across the crush by chance. You can see him caught amongst the vast tide of people, desperately trying to divert them to safety. When I spoke to him a few days later, he was consumed by guilt.
대한민국 경찰관으로서
I wasn't able to do my duty as a Korean police officer. If somehow there's a way to meet the bereaved families, I would like to express our apologies to them. Please pray for them.
Emotions are running high in South Korea. Yesterday, a victim's mother tore down the floral wreath that had been laid by the president. Today's gatherings may have been called vigils, but really they were protests.
Over this past week, the grief and the shock has turned to anger and a demand for answers as to what could have possibly happened to allow such a tragedy on Saturday night. Now, the people who are gathered here are mainly supporters of the main political opposition. But throughout South Korea, there is the perception that a young generation has been let down by the authorities yet again.
The last time South Korea saw a loss of life this atrocious was in 2014, when more than 300, mainly school children, died in a ferry disaster. That eventually brought down the then president after a series of weekly protests. The people here say they'll be back next Saturday. Nick Marsh, BBC News, Seoul.
The US singer and rapper Aaron Carter has died aged 34. A representative said he was found dead at his home in California and the cause of death is yet to be determined. He was the brother of Backstreet Boys member Nick Carter and rose to fame in the 1990s. The former child star went on to have a successful solo career. Time for all the sport now. Here's Lizzie Greenwood-Hughes at the BBC Sports Centre. Lizzie.
Hello, thank you, Rita. Good evening. Lots going on today, starting at the Rugby Union World Cup, where England's women will face the defending champions New Zealand in the final after seeing off a determined Canada side 26-19. Joe Curry was watching in Auckland.
Excited and expectant. England supporters turning out in Auckland, hoping for a straightforward route to the final. With an amateur Canada side standing in their way, confidence was high.
England are the #1 side in the world. They haven't lost a match now in over 3 years. Victory is something their fans have become accustomed to.
Something all of their opponents have become accustomed to is England's line-out and driving maul. And once again, it proved unstoppable as Marley Packer powered her way over the line. After England scored again, Canada could have been forgiven for letting their heads drop. Instead, they showed their grit and pace. As England's dominance weakened, Canada's confidence grew, finding the gap to pull themselves right back into the game before the break. But after the restart, a moment of magic. From behind their own try line, Claudia McDonald made a break and found Abby Dow. From there, it was pure box office. The winger turning on the afterburners to power away.
Oh, that's a screamer!
Dow showing exactly why her teammates call her Abby Wow. Canada dotted down once more, but the game belonged to England. The relief evident at the final whistle as their place in the World Cup final was confirmed. Joe Curry, BBC News, Auckland.
The home nation's autumn internationals continue this weekend, and Ireland backed up their #1 in the world status by beating South Africa 19 points to 16 in a thriller in Dublin. In the other game, Scotland beat Fiji, but Wales lost to the All Blacks. Meanwhile, at the Rugby League World Cup, England's men are through to the semi-finals after another show of complete dominance, this time thrashing 5th seeds Papua New Guinea 46-6. The women's side are also on the verge of reaching the last four. Adam Wilde reports from Wigan.
The grandest day of the tournament so far, a sense of occasion heightened by the presence of royalty. Few in any doubt this was something special. Indeed, that's exactly what England produced. Tom Burgess barging and barrelling his way through.
England are off to a flyer.
A show of strength that was running throughout the side. England fans are used to seeing Dom Young score at this World Cup. Here was another, and now seemingly almost everyone enjoying themselves.
A royal smile for rugby league royalty.
Everything going England's way, even the wet Wigan weather, slick hands, fast feet, and George Williams slipping and sliding across the line. The damage done, still time for a record. Makinson, the first England player to score 5 tries in a single international.
So England's best performance of the tournament so far on the biggest occasion so far. They're through to the semi-finals, hopes growing, and after a display like that, so too will expectations.
That's something England's women are dealing with admirably. Earlier, they took on Canada in their second pool match. Another comprehensive victory. Like the men, a semi-final is now in sight. The occasions are getting bigger, so too are England's performances. Adam Wilde, BBC News, Wigan.
Well, the World Cups keep coming and England's cricketers are into the T20 semi-finals. Ben Stokes finding his form just in time to help England narrowly beat Sri Lanka. Chris Woakes hitting the winning runs with 2 balls to spare. Their victory means hosts Australia are out of the tournament. It's been an historic day at the Gymnastics World Championships in Liverpool, where Gianni Regini Moran became the first British man to win a gold medal in a world floor competition. GB also won a first bronze on the rings. There were plenty of goals in the Premier League where Manchester City were in action today. You can find out all the scores on the BBC Sport website. But that's it from me. Back to you, Rita.
Thank you, Lizzie. And that's all from me this evening. Laura Kunsberg will be here on BBC One at 9 a.m. tomorrow. She'll be joined by the Shadow Environment Secretary Ed Miliband and the Cabinet Office Minister Oliver Dowden. But from me and the Late News team, it's good night.